he shot me a text with this picture, and it just said God at its best. And I think that's pretty cool. So look at that picture. Talk about, so maybe that's what got me into that mode of the gratitude there, Jesus. So thank you, my friend. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that. What a great picture. And if you have not had the chance to meet Jesus, you need to, because he is just an incredible human being. So, all right, well, let's get going here. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Is I'm excited to get to share with you a few things. And what I really want to talk about this morning is prospecting. Now, I just spent the last 3 days down in California. I went to 3 of the offices down there, and we made prospecting calls. And I just want to share with you some of the observations and things that I noticed, and just things that I think would be helpful for you. So I was on Monday in the Westlake office, on Tuesday in Oxnard, and then yesterday on Wednesday I was in the Santa Clarita office, and we talked about prospecting, and then we actually jumped on and made a bunch of phone calls. And in all 3 offices, I actually pulled out my computer and I made some calls while we were doing it as well, because a lot of times I've found that people are like, "Well, I want to hear you do it." And so I just want to share with you, though, what I talked about yesterday. So I noticed there's a few people from yesterday's class on here. And so I'm just going to repeat a couple of things that we talked about yesterday. But here was what it was I started out the whole prospecting class that we did yesterday. I started it by talking about closing multiple times and saying that we have to connect with people, we've got to create value, and then we've got to close. And I talked about that you're going to have to close typically more than one time in order for you to be able to get the appointment set. And so we went then and we started making our phone calls yesterday, and most of the people that I heard were getting answering machines, and they were leaving messages, and we just were calling and calling and calling. And then Jesse, which I don't know if he's on here, but Jesse jumped on and was making a phone call, and I heard him now then talking to this guy. And so I just kind of wandered over to listen to the conversation. Well, Jesse had his earbuds in, and he was talking, and I kept leaning over and saying, "Okay, say this or say that." And he would kind of give me a little bit of a curious look. And then finally he pulled out one of his earbuds and said, "I can't hear you." And which, so I was kind of like, which was interesting, because one of the times I told him to say, "Let's do this." And right after I said it, he said, "Let's do this." But then he told me, "I can't hear what you're telling me." Well, I finally just said, "Well, put the phone on speaker." So he did, so I could hear. And I kept trying to get him to ask for the appointment. And I finally just said, "Let me take over." So I actually took over making the phone call. Right in the middle of the call, I started talking to the guy. And I kept doing all of the stuff that we talk about, which I'm gonna give to you guys today, these key pieces that you've got to do. But the best part about this was at the end of the conversation, I was able to set an appointment with this guy. But I had to ask, and I wasn't keeping track. In fact, sometimes agents will keep something on their desk, a penny or a nickel or a quarter or a dime or something that they can slide over every time they close, which I think is a really good idea, because just exactly what I'm saying to you right now, I don't remember how many times I closed, but if I had had that where I was sliding it over every time I asked a closing question, I would have been able to say after. But I asked the agents, I said, "How many times did I have to close before that guy finally said yes?" Because he just kept saying, "I don't see the point. I don't see the point. I don't see the point." Which in another way is another way of saying he didn't see the value. He didn't see the value of getting together. So I had to keep, in my mind, creating that value, or what I thought was value, until I finally did create the value. And he then said yes and set the appointment. Well, I asked the agents afterwards, "How many times did I close before he said yes?" And one of the agents said it was at least 5 times, but it might have been 7 times. So I just want to remind you guys of that, of remember, you're probably going to have to close more than once, which a lot of times as I listen to agents, what I find, and hey guys, I'm guilty of this too. Meaning if I'm prospecting and nobody else is around, I'm guilty of actually giving up pretty early on. And in fact, let me share with you a quick story about that. So early on in my career, my office was just right outside of my broker's. And I was standing there making phone calls one day, and there was a wall between my office and his that was about 3/4 height. It didn't go all the way to the ceiling. But I could hear him talking to a potential recruit, and I heard him say, "Let's stand here and listen to Russ make some phone calls." Well, as soon as I knew somebody was listening to me and going to be evaluating and judging me, I'm a pretty competitive person. And so as a result of that, I was like, I am not giving up on this until I set an appointment. And so I kept after it and kept after it and kept after it. And I don't remember that I got an appointment on that particular phone call. In fact, I probably didn't. But I'll tell you what, I asked and closed more times for an appointment on that call than I had any other call I had done that particular day, because I had someone listening to me. So here's one of the things that I would recommend for you guys. And so I'm going to give you a few ideas of things. So the first one that I would recommend, though, is when you are prospecting, do it with other people. Get with other people around you to be prospecting. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is you're more likely to actually do it if you have somebody else that you are going to be doing it with. If you have that where you say, okay, let's get together and do our prospecting, you're more likely to do your prospecting. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is if you have other people standing there listening to you, it is going to create in you that desire, that need to close more than once. In fact, actually, it kind of coincidental here, but I just looked up on my screen and I can see Monica Amesqua. And Monica on Tuesday was making phone calls, and I started to follow her around the office as she was walking and talking on the phone. And after she got off the phone, she said, I wouldn't have pushed as hard or talked as long to that guy if you hadn't have been following me around listening to what I was saying. See, that's my point with this, is if you have somebody else there listening to you, that when you get off the phone call, that you know they're going to say to you, hey, why didn't you ask this, or why didn't you do that? You're going to be more likely to do it. So my first thing that I would recommend for you on your prospecting is make sure you have other people around with you while you're doing it, if you need that extra push to ask a few more times for the close. So that's the first thing, is do it with other people, because you'll get the synergy and you can have fun with it. You can have scenarios where afterwards you can laugh about it and things together. It keeps the energy up if you will do that. So that's the first thing I would recommend today for you, is as you're prospecting, do it in groups. Get with a few people, or at least one other person that you know you're going to push each other. Second thing is you have got to focus on setting an appointment. Meaning, sometimes we get so caught up in just making the contacts. We want to be able to, at the end of our prospecting session, say, okay, well, I made my 30 contacts that I committed that I would do every day. I've made those contacts. Now I can go home and feel good about it. Well, the point of us prospecting is not about contacts. Now, granted, do we have to make contacts? Absolutely, we have to make contacts. But it's not about making a contact. It's about setting an appointment. So your focus has got to be on setting appointments. Now, for me, let me tell you quickly where that came from for me. Early on in my career, I was focused on contacts. I was making 50 contacts every day. And I would go home at night feeling good about it because I had made my 50 contacts. But I was not making the income that I wanted to be making. And I met someone that really got me focused on setting appointments. And you guys have heard me talk about it. But what he told me is, don't go home until you set an appointment. Quit worrying about contacts. Now, that doesn't mean quit worrying about keeping track of contacts. We still keep track. But he said, don't worry about how many contacts. You prospect until you set an appointment. And for me, when I made that commitment, when I decided I will prospect all day, every day until I set an appointment, that is my number one job. It is the one thing that I have to get done in the day. As soon as I did that, it is amazing how many more times you will ask for the appointment when you know that I have to set an appointment or I can't go home. For me, that's what my career consisted of, was I will set an appointment or I won't go home until I do. Now, once I did that, that's where it's going to change your approach. You're going to be willing to ask more times, to ask 3 or 4 or 5 times. So I want to challenge you guys today as you're prospecting to close at least 3 times. Make it a goal for every phone call that you do today that you will close, meaning you will ask for the appointment a minimum of 3 times. At least 3 times. Don't hang up. Now, so how do we keep that going? Well, let's talk about that then. So the next thing in terms of your prospecting, you really should be standing up while you're prospecting. You will notice, or I'm assuming you can tell, that I'm standing up. I'm not in a chair that I'm rocking back and forth. I'm standing up doing this. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to have more energy, more enthusiasm. I'm going to bring more to this presentation that I'm doing for you guys. And the same goes for you in terms of your prospecting. If you will stand up and get your body involved. 55% of communication is our body language. So as you're talking to people, use your hands and talk and get it really involved to where they're going to feel that energy coming through the telephone as you're talking to them. Okay, next, make sure you're repeating and affirming. We have got to repeat and affirm, but you got to do it in a way that actually means something to the person. There are so many times that I listen to agents, and again, guys, I know I'm guilty of everything I'm saying to you. So I'm talking to myself just as much as I am you. But there are times when I will find myself on there. My repeat and affirm sounds like, oh, you've lived here for 5 years? That's great. Does it sound like I thought it was great when I say it that way? No. Versus if I were to say 5 years, wow, really? Where did you move from? See, if you will get involved and really be curious, you've got to come across as if you are curious. See, you, in essence, think of it as every phone call is a performance. You are giving a performance to the people every single time you get on the phone. And do you want them to change the channel or hang up? Now, believe me, over the last 3 days, as I sat there and made the phone calls, I had plenty of people hang up on me. I'm not saying that you're not going to get people hanging up on you. They will. You're going to get hangups. But are you doing everything you can to keep them from hanging up on you as you're calling and talking? Well, how you're going to keep that from happening is you've got to repeat and affirm, but you got to repeat and affirm like you mean it. And have some fun with it too. Meaning, if they give you something, they say something that gives you the opportunity to really repeat and affirm. In fact, I would love it if one time the prospect actually said to me, when I'm not bringing enough energy, or when I go, that's great. I would love it if one time the prospect just jokingly said to me, "What, will you really sound like you think it's great?" Like, honestly, if they would do that to us, we could be like, okay, obviously I need to bring a little bit more energy and enthusiasm. So repeat and affirm. Make sure you are repeating and you're affirming back to the person that you understand. All right. Now, once we have done that and we have we're standing up, we've got the energy and enthusiasm, we need to be asking questions, then we're going to repeat and affirm those questions back. And then when it's appropriate, use empathy. So especially if you're talking to a for sale by owner or an expired, and they say, for sale by owner, we want to do it on our own. You want to, hey, if I were you, I would feel the exact same way. I would want to do it on my own as well. Now, this phone call that I was telling you about yesterday that I closed at least 5 times on before I got the appointment. With that guy, I had to show empathy in order to get that to take place as well. At one point, he started telling me about how agents don't care about the client. They just want to show up and get their paycheck. And I had to say, look, I totally understand where you're coming from. I get to deal with agents every single day myself. So I know exactly what you mean, and I understand your frustration. See, by doing that creates this connection that is going to have them feel like they understand. Now, the next piece that I want to talk to is this. Throw in some sound bites. As you're making your calls, have some sound bites that you can throw in there. So sound bites are going to be either a 10 to a 30-second commercial where you're telling them either a personal record, so you're telling them some personal success stories. So let me give you an example, because a lot of this stuff I had to use yesterday in order to get this guy to commit to an appointment. And so I had to say to him, look, one of the things that we do as agents is we will go out and knock on doors. Or in this case, since I was in California, I said, one of the things that our agents do is we go out and do door dropping, which because they can't door knock right now in California, they go and do door dropping. And so I was explaining to him that we go out and we do these door droppings, or these in Utah door knocking. And in the process of doing that, we're going to come across properties before they hit the market. And so then I gave him just an example of of a scenario where I came across a property like that. So that's what you've got to do, is use some type of a personal record, or a soundbite could be a company record or a company example. So you could talk about, for example, that our company, Century 21 Everest, the #2 company in the Century 21 system, and we have the #1 office in the whole world for Century 21. That should be proof that we know how to get homes sold. So you want to use some type of a success story as part of these sound bites. So as you're prospecting, I want you to answer the question, are you using sound bites? Are you taking the time to stop and explain to them for 10 to 30 seconds some type of a success story that you've personally had, or an agent in the office has had, or that we've had within the company? Are you sharing those type of things? And then finally, after you've done that, hopefully you've created some value. Now we can close. We got to ask for the appointment. And I already said, you're going to have to ask a minimum of 3 times, but typically it's somewhere between 3 and 5 that you're going to have to ask for the appointment before they're going to give it to you. So I want to challenge you today as you're prospecting. Ultimately, 2 things. Number 1 is that you have your focus today be 100% in your prospecting about setting appointments. That 100% commit, that even if it's just for today, that you are going to prospect and you are going to set 1 new appointment. Set an appointment with somebody you have never talked to. Now, and then number 2 to that is, which is going to be part of this, is set the goal that you will close a minimum of 3 times on every call. Now, like I said, if they hang up on you, not much you can do about that. But don't you be giving up and saying, okay, well, let me give you my information and give me a call if you have any questions, until you have closed a minimum of 3 times, at least 3 times today. So I want to see in the chat box, who will commit to asking for the appointment minimum of 3 times today before you hang up the phone. Now, again, I get it that people may not give you the opportunity. They may hang up on you before that, but that you personally are not going to quit trying, meaning you'll keep asking questions and closing, asking questions and closing until you actually set the appointment. Oh, there's Jesse's on there now. Good. Glad you joined us, Jesse. All right. Well, hey guys, thanks for being with me. I love seeing these. I'm committed and I'm in. Love it. Thank you. Watch what happens if you will do that. If you will commit and you will ask a minimum of 3 times, let's see what happens. And then shoot me a text and let me know what happened. I want to hear about it. My phone number, 801-556-4441. So 801-556-4441. All right, guys.